This is Dave at TitleSearch.com. In Title Search records, you may find records of adverse possession where property has been transferred or some property rights have been subject to adverse possession claims. Adverse possession is a historical method to claim property rights based on abandonment or use by a third party. And the way that it works is where there's a property or a portion of the property which is not defended by the current owner, a new owner can claim rights based on an open and notorious continuous use of that property. Now, it doesn't mean that you can show up, pitch a tent on a corner of a property and say, hey, this is mine. In most states, there is a statutory time frame that the property needs to be used. In some cases, it's 7, 10, 15, 20 years, so it's not like it can happen overnight. And the use has to be continuous during that time. It has to be notorious, meaning that it is contradicting to what the ownership is, meaning that if you lease a house for 10 years, you don't own it because you have an agreement with that owner. You're not contradicting their ownership. Has to be open, meaning that you can't hide your possession of that property. It has to be out in the open and notorious. The origin of adverse possession comes from the old squatters' rights and homesteading laws, where large tracts of property in the Midwestern part of the United States were wide open, and people could come in and fence off a section, and it was open, it was notorious, everybody knew who was there with their farm or with their homestead, and eventually they would come to own that property. So that mechanism has been used in the current times for places where, let's say, you have a house and somebody builds a fence on your neighbor's yard, and if they build their fence 3 feet onto your property, and that fence exists uncontested for 7, 10, or 20 years, whatever it is in that state, the property owner with the encroaching fence may lose that section of their property if they don't defend it and demand that that fence be torn down. Another example of adverse possession is on commercial properties. You may notice where a commercial property, an office building, has a public area, maybe a little courtyard, maybe a fountain, maybe some steps that goes up to the main entrance, and you may walk by one day and see that one of those entrances is blocked off with a rope, or a section of the fountain is blocked off with yellow tape, but there's no construction. There's no reason for that to happen. And the origin of that defense of that area of the property is to protect against adverse possession. If a commercial property owner with a public courtyard allows public use of that courtyard with no defense of it and no contesting of the use for a period of time, then the public or the government may say, hey, look, this is now public property. You no longer own this property. So property managers who are hired by commercial ventures and commercial properties have a schedule where regularly, once a year, every other year, they will rope off different sections of that commercial property to ensure that they can document, no, for this period of time, we did not allow the public on this property. And then that fends off any adverse possession claims. More recently, there are, I guess, more ambiguous or less honorable uses of adverse possession because of the mortgage crisis. It's creating an opportunity for individuals to use squatters' rights to enter foreclosed, abandoned, and vacant homes and claim adverse possession. It's open, it's notorious. They're certainly not going to be able to stay there for 7 years, but because of the fact it's a civil matter, in some cases, law enforcement has difficulty in evicting them from the property. The actual rules and use of adverse possession may not be known to these squatters, and they use some terms like sovereign rights or divine rights to kind of justify their use and file all kind of papers with the court. But in reality, it's not really the intended use of adverse possession. But that's one of the reasons why it's been in the news more frequently. And in any event, it creates havoc for the legitimate property owner or the lender, who may not even know about this adverse possession claim against their foreclosed or vacant property until it's brought to their attention. And as we know, lenders have so many foreclosed and abandoned houses that even once it is brought to their attention, it may be difficult for them to do anything about. So adverse possession, it's a claim of property rights used to transfer rights from a legitimate owner to a new owner based on abandonment or lack of use.